So I know we're all itching, you know, it's been cold all year. We're ready for some topwater fishing. If you don't like topwater fishermen, then I don't know what's wrong with you because you're not a real fisherman. It's the most fun way to catch them all year. And it's getting that time, you know, post-spawn, you catch some during spawn, but post-spawn is when it really, really starts shining. So I'm gonna show you my 3 favorite topwaters. I throw a lot of topwaters, but I have 3 kind of profiles and styles that are my favorite, and I can do almost everything, at least around my area in the South, pretty much all the hotter months, you know, from late April all the way until October. I have these 3 baits, or some variations of these 3 baits on. I love topwater fishing, and these are the ones I use. So when it comes to hard bait topwater fishing, I know there's like a lot of prop baits and things like that, but I'm not a big prop bait guy. I pretty much narrow it down to walking baits and poppers. That's my go-to baits all summer. I can do about everything I need to, regardless of what the fish are targeting, with walking baits and poppers. So one bait that I have tied on almost all the hotter months around here in, you know, South Carolina, Georgia, this area, we have some real big forage. Blueback herring is one of the main things fish eat around here, and they love it. I mean, it's like a drug for fish. They can't get enough herring. And even on lakes where there's not herring, there's still big gizzard shad, you know, bigger shad. And I like a big pencil popper bait to imitate that. This is a Yo-Zuri pencil popper 135. This is a really big bait. You see in my hand here, it's very, very large. But with it being very large, it makes a lot of commotion and it casts really, really far. I love having this bait on the deck because I can't tell you how many times, you know, in May or June that I might not even be fishing topwater specifically, but I'll be fishing a brush pile or doing something and fishing down the bank in a pocket and look out and see a fish chase a shad or a herring, you know, way out in the middle. This really, really large bait casts so far that I keep this tied on my walking stick rod, 7-4 rod, to cast and basically snipe fish, you know, when they're way, way far away. This is a great bait for that, and it's really, really loud. So if you land anywhere near a fish, chasing bait fish, they'll come back, they hear this, they'll usually come back and get it. It's a 3-hook bait. I always recommend when you're throwing a really, really large walking bait, the big ones, you always need 3 hooks because fish tend to swat at them. It's a big profile. They might hit it with their mouth closed. They might just knock it in the air, but with 3 hooks, ups your chances a ton of hooking those fish. I haven't changed this one yet. I like to put a feathered treble hook on the back. Don't know that it really adds that much strike appeal, but I've done it for years and it's kind of one of those things that's a confidence boost. Is I like to put a feathered treble hook on the back to make it just a little bit more enticing. But when it comes to colors, keep it pretty simple with walking baits. Usually if it's a walking bait, they're eating shad, herring, something like that. So you want a shad color, a shad pattern. I use a bone or a clearish color, clearish chrome, something like that. But the bone is really, really productive when you know you got intermittent clouds, sun, or just straight clouds. The more opaque bone color is probably my go-to most of the time, but then I'll switch to a clear on maybe real slick sunny days just so they can't get quite as good of a look at it. So when it comes to walking baits, that big pencil popper is a really, really good bait, but the fish gotta be feeding pretty good or feeding on big forage because it's a big profile bait. So the other walking bait that I try to keep tied on is just the Yo-Zuri pencil. This is a 2-hook, a lot smaller bait. You can see it in my hand compared to it. A lot smaller than that big pencil popper. This bait's a good, you know, if you don't have that big forage, if you think the fish are eating more threadfin shad rather than big herring or big gizzard shad, or maybe your lake just doesn't have that big of bait. This is a really, really good bait for that, and it's not quite as loud. If it's really, really slick, no wind, nothing like that, or the fish are a little more pressured, this is a lot better bait for that scenario. And this is unique because it does have 2 hooks, but the Yo-Zuri pencil has 2 very large hooks, and it's not as big of a bait as that pencil popper, so you don't necessarily have to have the 3, but these 2 hooks, when a fish does get this, you've got them good. They may miss it every now and then without the smaller hooks, but you don't have to worry about losing them when they get it. And this one also, I would add a feathered treble hook to the back, and it's a really, really easy to walk bait to do that, you know, walk the dog presentation to bring it back. Really, really good shad spawn bait. Pencil popper is really good herring spawn bait. This is a really, really good shad spawn bait. So the last topwater bait that I'll have tied on pretty much all summer is the 3DB popper. This is just a popper style bait. And the difference between the popper and the walking baits is I consider walking baits to be baits to target fish eating, you know, pelagic type bait fish like the herring or the shad even. But This is more of a bluegill imitator. It can be productive sometime during a shad spawn, something like that, but this is what I use when fish are eating bluegills. And it's a little bit slower presentation. I love it for, you know, that May, June when brim beds get up, or when you got shade lines. It's good to throw in shade lines because it doesn't, you can fish it however you want. I like a relatively quick retrieve, but it's still a super effective bait on the stop, and you know, with slower bloop pops rather than the twitch, 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 the really, really quick twitching. This bait is also really, really good when bluegills are on bed, but also when bass first finish spawning and there's a lot of fry guarders still up shallow. The males sit around and guard the fry for, you know, a little while after the spawning process is over. And this is a bluegill imitator. So bluegills eat fry, and the male bass really, really hate a popper. This is a great bait for covering water, just running down the bank that time of year, whereas the walking baits are more like open water style baits that I'll throw on points or schooling fish, things like that. This is more of a bank running style hard bait. And you can see on here, it's actually something I did with this popper. I actually added a suspend dot, a lead dot to the back of this popper. And that's kind of a unique thing I do with poppers sometimes, and it makes it sit more tail down, so fish will get it a little bit better because it's sitting more tail down. Makes it cast better because it always flies butt first. Makes it a lot easier cast, and it'll change your popping noise a little bit. If the popper sits flat like this, it tends to make bloops every time, like the bubble. You know, you see when you twitch a popper, it's bloop, and makes the big bubble. Well, when you add the little weight to the back, whether it's a bigger hook, a suspend dot, something like that, and it sits tail down, it's more of a splashing popper. And I prefer splashing poppers. So I do this to make the popper splash more than to bloop. And you can fish it a little bit quicker because it's got more weight to it, cast a little bit better. Just a little adaptation I do to a lot of my poppers. And I keep it pretty simple when it comes to poppers. I use this bluegill color, or every now and then if I think the bluegills are really dark, I know all you've seen probably when you get bluegill beds, sometimes they get really black. I actually still throw the same color, but I'll take a Sharpie and color the belly a little bit to make it darker, add some black outline to it, just to darken it up like a bluegill. But it's pretty much the only color I throw. I just might adapt it a little bit here and there. And all three of these topwaters, so I've alternated over the years between monofilament and braid and things like that. One thing I'd never use fluorocarbon on topwaters because it tends to pull the bait underwater. But I have got to where I pretty much exclusively use 30 or 40 pound Yo-Zuri Super Braid. The only thing I might change up is sometimes if you got a lot of fish swatting at your bait, what they'll do is knock it in the air, and then with braid, sometimes your hook will actually wrap up around the braid. Then your cast is fouled, and that fish is probably not gonna come back and eat it. If I'm having a lot of fish swat at the bait, not get it, and they have to hit it 4 or 5 times before they get it, I'll actually use a monofilament line just to add your hookup ratio a little bit better. But I prefer braid because when you make a long cast, especially with this great big plug here, when you throw a pencil popper out there, you know, as far as you can, 150 feet, you need that braid to actually get a little hook penetration way out there on those long casts. But these three topwaters are they're tied on my boat for pretty much the entire warm months. And they're situational baits. You know, one day you might run across a brim bed, you need the popper. You see some run brim on the bank, you need it tied on because it could be that one fish that makes a difference in the tournament. Same thing with the walking baits. You see a fish chase a bait fish, whether or not it's your primary game plan, you need it on the deck to have it ready for those likely situations.